Call the regular legislative meeting to order at 8:17 p.m. Everyone who can, please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag
Flag
of the United
of the
States of
United States of
America
America,
and to the
and to the
republic
republic
which it
for which it
stands,
stands,
one
one
nation,
nation,
under God,
under God,
indivisible,
indivisible,
with liberty and
liberty,
justice for all.
justice for all.
Please remain standing for a moment of silent contemplation or silent prayer as your conscience finds appropriate. Thank you. Please be seated.
Ah,
Members of the council, you have a agenda before you. Are any changes required to the agenda?
Mr. Mayor,
Yes.
if I may, once the agenda comes up, in light of the fact that we have a member of our body who's under the weather, may it be possible that we could go straight to the legislative action item?
Well, we can. I presume that the let me look at the presentations for just a moment. Staff.
That's very kind of you, Councilman.
I would ask that we allow Bolton to make their presentation. I suspect we're paying them to be here. Is that correct, Mr. Decision?
That's fine with me. I appreciate the kindness.
Okay, so let's do the Bolton presentation and then immediately jump to the legislative. Well, let's jump immediately to public comments and go from there. Everyone okay with that?
That would be fine. Thank you.
Okay, any public discussion on that, that change? Okay, may I please have a motion to adopt the agenda as amended?
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Councilmember Lingua, seconded by Councilmember Smith. Is there discussion? Are there public comments now that it's actually on the floor? Okay, we'll do a roll call vote. Councilmember Smith,
Aye.
Councilmember Lingua,
Aye.
Member Foe.
Aye.
I'm called in the wrong order, but you guys were there, ready to go. That's good.
On our toes.
Okay, let's get the presentation from Competitive Market Review from Scott Schreiber, Managing Director of Bolton.
Director Smith, if you can do an introduction, please.
Yes, good evening, Mayor and Council. During last year's budget process, a council member inquired about the competitiveness of salaries. And we budgeted in the current budget cycle to conduct a market survey. And for that survey, we brought on Bolton USA. They also manage our defined benefit, part of the defined benefit reporting. And we have with us tonight Mr. Scott Schreiber from Bolton USA. And he's going to go over the study. Scott?
Yes, hello, can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, very good. Well, my pleasure to be here tonight. Is somebody got the study queued up? How do you want to do this?
Paul?
I thought you were going to share the screen, Scott.
You want me to share? Sure. Let me do that. All right, let me go here. Let me share here. There we go. There. Let me get it back to the beginning. Okay, let me move you here. There we go. How's that? Cover page, good? Everyone can see
Yes.
it's fine. All right, then. Again, my name is Scott Schreiber. I'm with Bolton. And it's my pleasure to work with John and Paul in doing this market study. So I'll move through it. This first page, or page 2 of the study, just shows what your current structure looks like. It is a 14-grade structure with 18 steps overall, total of 226 pay cells, if you would. There's an 8 to 10% spread between grades when you go down the structure. Between steps from 1 to 7 is a 2 point, I'm sorry, between 1 and 2, it's 1.5, between 3 and 7 is 2.5% between steps. Above 7 to 18, it's 2% from each step to the next. When you look at the total spread, about a 40% spread between maximum and minimum. Of the grades, only 12 are currently being used by active jobs. And as I mentioned, there's 14 grades and 28 distinct titles. And so there's a lot of grades for not that many titles. And so one of the recommendations towards the end would be to eliminate a couple of the grades. But that is the structure that's currently in place at Riverdale Park. We then looked at how you are utilizing the current structure. And displayed in the graphic here is the grades on the left-hand axis, and across the top are the steps. And the numbers you see within the body is the count of employees that occupy that grade and that step. And we in Bolton believe that a spread of plus or minus 10% puts you within a competitive zone. So step 7M, which is the darker green shade, is the anchor step of your current structure to the market. What that means is the structure is built, so step 7 represents the competitive positioning to the marketplace. So allows some individuals be less than 7, and certainly allows for long-term service for those individuals who are over 7. And again, a plus or minus 10% competitive range, you can see that 78% of the current employees are within that competitive range around step 7. Another 18% are even above that. So as we look at this distribution of employees within the current structure, we come to the conclusion that the current structure is being administered appropriately as designed. And that's important because the first step is how are you using the structure? And then the second step of the project is the structure competitive to the external market? If it's not, what would it take to make it competitive again? And so that's a look at the current structure and how you're currently paying employees within that structure. So as we go through, feel free to ask me questions as I go through. We identified 30 distinct titles currently being used. We were able to identify market data for 20 of those 30 jobs, and it was all up and down the entire structure. So again, we were able to get good market data on 28 of the 30 roles. And the market data came from 2 different sources. It's what we call, we assembled what I've labeled as a public sector database. And through consultation with John and Paul, we looked at the 2 databases and identified a number of organizations that we wanted to include in the 2 databases. The first one is Mercer conducted a survey of counties within Maryland, and we identified 6 of the 12 counties to be included in this database. And the reason for the 6 is we needed a certain number to be able to extract enough data from our database. And again, working with John and Paul, we identified the 6 counties you see on the screen to be included in this public sector database. The database was created just a year ago. And the bottom line, as you can see, we used an annualized factor to age the data by 3% to move it forward into 2023. And again, it's been just about a year. The other part of the database was the Maryland Municipal League collects and publishes data for cities and towns within the state of Maryland. And again, working with leadership, we identified the following 9 cities and towns to be included in this public sector database. And we had to select from those cities that the MML had data, for which the MML had data. And it was based upon, the size of the cities, the age of the data reported. And again, we identified the 9 cities and towns you see listed here. Again, we utilize a 3.0% aging factor to move them forward to July of 2023. So all total, there were 6 counties and 9 cities that comprised our public sector database for Riverdale Park. So containing data from 15 governmental agencies, we consider this to be a pretty substantial database for which to compare your current structure to. So we were pretty happy with, again, 15 different governmental agencies. So what you see here is just simply a table that shows the actual data from our database for the 28 positions in Riverdale Park. You see listed by the job title, the current grade the job is in, and the mean 25th percentile, 50th, and 75th percentile of the market data for each job within the public sector database. And going forward, I'm going to focus on the 50th percentile. In the 50th percentile, the median, the middle of the market, it's that data point that half the reported figures fall below and half of the reported figures fall above. And so I'm going to compare on the next slide where Riverdale Park structure is relative to the median of the market. That's typically a statistic that we utilize to show an organization how they compare to the marketplace. And that's what this slide represents. Is it big enough for everyone to see?
I can see.
Yes.
Yeah. I can make it a little bit bigger, I think. Yeah, a little bit too big. Okay, that's a little bit better. So what this exhibit shows, there we go, a little bit better, is again, the same jobs, the same grades. And here now you see in this column, the hourly wage rate for step 7M. And again, step 7 is the anchor to the marketplace. The entire structure is built around step 7. And so what we want to do is compare step 7 to the 50th percentile or the median of the market data. And so that's this column here. And then this column is the percent of step 7 to the 50th percentile is in this column here. And the final column is this average by grade, but you do have multiple jobs in a grade. And so we show what the average of that is by grade. And as you go down this last column by grade, you can see that the percent of the 50th percentile at the top of the house is in the 80s and the low 90s, 91, 93, compared to the bottom 4 grades, 3 or 4 grades, that it's at 100% or more. So overall, when you take an overall average from grade 63 to grade 50, it's 93%. So again, overall, the current structure, step 7M, is 93% of the market at the 50th percentile. But it does vary differently for the top grades versus the bottom grades. And that's what this number is down here. For grades 57 to 63, it's only 90% of the market versus grades 50 to 56, it's 102% of the market. So there is quite a bit of difference when we look at those two groupings of grades as far as the relationship to the market is concerned. This is basically the whole crux of the project. Again, it is developing good market data. It is measuring where your current structure is relative to the market, and then figuring out how much we have to move it forward to July 1st of 2023 to be competitive at the 50th percentile. And that's what the recommendations that are coming. And I have a couple first. First thing is the CEO town manager should be removed from the step structure. Technically, there's a grade 64, but I'd like to recommend remove that job from the step structure. For reference, again, the 50th percentile marketplace for that role is $82.02 per hour. Next recommendation is there's a job in grade 50, a maintenance technician 1. It's a grade 50 by itself. The recommendation is to move it up to grade 53. And what we want to do, as I mentioned, there's some grades that didn't have many jobs in it. To simplify the structure, we're recommending to move this one job up to grade 53 and eliminate then grades 50, 51, and 52, or the bottom 3 grades. The market data for this job did show that the maintenance role is 11% behind the market at grade 50P. So it helps it a little bit moving it up to 53. Now, the interesting thing is if we move the 2 incumbents who are currently at step 2 and the other 2 incumbents who are currently at step 3, it added a total of 36 cents per hour to those four individuals. So at an annualized basis, you can make this move for just $3,000. And it does simplify the structure a little bit as far as administration is concerned. Doing that, there's an empty job in a grade 51. We would recommend that goes to 53 based upon peer. And there's a maintenance technician 2, the next step up, which we recommend going to grade 54. Again, both those jobs are currently vacant. So there'd be no immediately cost to do that. So those are 2 kind of this administrative recommendations. The main recommendation is to move the entire structure by 7% in order to attain a market competitive positioning at the 50th percentile. Again, what we do is we move the entire structure by 7%. What that does mean, because you have a step structure, is all steps would move by the 7%, and therefore all individuals would receive a 7% increase. Let me say that again. To move the structure by 7, all steps go up by 7, and therefore all individuals would receive a 7% increase. With an annualized budget of $3,629,000, that equates to an additional annualized base pay of a little bit over $250,000, $254,000. Now that cost is just in base pay alone. There are other cost items that would be impacted by raising base pay, like overtime. Obviously, if I'm making 7% more in base pay, my overtime goes up by 7%, assuming the amount of hours in overtime stays the same. Leave programs and benefit programs. Your pension plan obviously would be impacted by this as well. So this would be the new structure. It's simply just 7% added to the old structure at each step. And the result would be, if we looked at those same percentiles by grade, I'll remind you that those top couples were in the low 80s and mid 80s and some in the low 90s. You can see again, all those are within that 10% spread as far as the competitive positioning is concerned. And the only one of concern is this grade 56. In this note here, the primary position in a grade 56 is your police officer, your entry level role. And so if you're going to be aggressive to the market for any job, that's probably a good one to be aggressive for, to be able to attract and retain those entry level police officers. So I'm not that bothered by that one job being that high. Again, from my position, it's not bad to be able to be a little more aggressive in your ability to attract that type of role to the organization. The rest of them are right where we want them to be, that plus or minus 10%. So as if we move the entire structure by the 7%. Now, having said that, as an alternative, I showed you earlier that there is a significant difference between grades 57 to 63, as opposed to 53 and 56, the bottom grades. So alternative to moving all grades, all steps by 7% would be to move the top 7, 8 grades by 10% and hold the bottom 3, 4 grades to their current 7M, or have a 0% adjustment. So again, we're holding the bottom 4 grades where they currently are, and we're increasing the top 8 grades by 10%. And that would add overall cost the organization about $290,000, again, in base pay only, with consideration to other cost items. And what that does then is it brings, again, more calibration of the grade to as close as we can to 100%. Because again, we're raising these by 10% and holding these constant. And you can see very clearly that we're all within that plus or minus 10% realm. So again, that is not the same across the board. It is treating some grades and therefore some employees differently within the structure, but to calibrate it more closely to the overall market, that would be an alternative. And then the last recommendation I have is you need to keep your STEP program going. This across the board increase is simply to calibrate the structure and taking a step to make sure the structure is competitive to the market at this point in time. Then the individuals would receive that same sort of increase. Again, it's a calibration to make sure we stay competitive as of July 1st, 2023, but you need to keep the annual merit increases in place in order to allow individuals to continue to move through the structure. That's what we want. We want to enable the individuals to move through the structure to continue to grow in their compensation as they serve the town of Riverdale Park. So with that, I'll take questions.
Thank you, Mr. Schreiber. Councilmember Smith, you have your hand up, please. Go ahead.
Sure. Can we go back to the slide that lists the job titles alongside the salaries?
Sure. That's this slide
right
here.
Here we go.
It's step 7M of the structure.
Sure. First question, did town staff have any input on this survey?
Yes.
In what sense?
In sense that we discussed the organizations that could be included, and there was several organizations that could not be included because of the age of data or for whatever reason. So I wanted to come up with a as reflective of a market database as we could, based upon the availability of the two databases.
Okay, but we didn't ask staff if their current salary ranges are sufficient to retain them in their positions versus seeking employment elsewhere?
No, I did not do that. This is simply an analysis of the current structure to the external marketplace.
Okay, and how do you, in your experience, how does our structure compare with municipalities that have a unionized workforce?
Compared as far as the number of steps and grades, or
Just the competitiveness of our compensation are basically are places where staff are organized into a bargaining unit. Do they tend to have higher or lower, about the same salaries?
no, not necessarily. And again, it depends upon the organization. We have identified the job and we captured data for the job. In some of these jobs, they would be organized in different communities, like a police officer. There may or may not be collective bargain within those municipalities that I've included. So we try to be competitive for the job, regardless if it's in a union or not. Obviously the directors and leaders would not be unionized, but several of the lower level positions may be unionized in those different municipalities.
Thank you. That's actually a good segue to my next question. Is it common for in municipalities for junior staff from the police department to be making the same as folks in staff roles that are in supervisory positions?
It's not uncommon, yes.
Okay, and I would be interested to see how this data compares if you remove the police department positions, because it looks like that would be driving the numbers up a little bit by position. Is that right? I'm looking at that. For example, a private entry level in the police department is making the same as a senior level telecommunicator, which is great for that police officer. I'm glad he's or she is making that salary. But I'm wondering if we're not selling short our other staff a little bit.
Well, if you just want to use that example, one's at 114, the other one's 106. I used 110. So, it might be a 1 or 2 basis points here or there, but it's not going to be significant. The relative positioning is not going to be that much off. Maybe a couple basis points here or there. But similar, as you go up higher, again, the police leadership management is some of the farthest away from the market, again, at 88%, right?
Right. And
So-
then we were talking about, that was another question I had in your alternative proposal to the 7% across the board, just giving the raise to that top end of that schedule. That would essentially be giving raises to folks who are primarily management, but not folks who are at the junior staff level.
It started at 57. The
Okay.
recommendation would be here. So these are all still individual contributors. Okay,
Yeah, I see a lot of coordinator, manager, leader in there.
up on the top, but it would still be on the alternate recommendation would include grade 57 and up.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Town Manager Lustician, you have your hand up. Please speak.
Yeah, yes, sir. Just kind of a overarching comment from my perspective in leading the staff organization. It would be my recommendation, should the council support it, to go with an across the board approach in terms of morale, in terms of managing a small organization, dividing up the pay structure where this one gets this percent or that one gets that percent. I worry about the impact on the organization. And I would point out that while our lower wage earners may be in the 90 to 110% of the 50 percentile currently, or very close to that, those folks are paying the same amount for healthcare and daily living expenses as everyone else is. And I think with the various stressors of the economy and that is plus just running the organization, I would strongly encourage the council to not go with the 10% for the upper grades and nothing for the lower grades.
Thank you for that comment, Mr. Town Manager. Additional council questions or comments? Additional, are there any, well, not additional, are there any public comments or questions? Mr. Schreiber, I would like to scroll up a little bit. There was a picture that you had of the number of people in each pay cell, and there's our green bands covering that in that table.
Right there.
That's the one. So you identified step 7M as being the point of comparison. So that step, and that's some numbers in the other table that are what step 7M is. And the question is, I mean, I see that, you know, in the steps 3 through 12 that we have 78% are in there, but it looks to me like we are actually a little bit high for the higher grades. So the distribution of people in the position is actually in the 13 through 18 range more often in the higher grades. And so did you test whether 7M was an accurate median step point, or did you just identify it as that? So,
yeah, no, that was identified as the basis for the construction of your current structure was 7M, and that's where the M comes from, was market. That's where the M. So that's the way your current structure was originally designed. And so that was the basis for the comparison, to answer that specific question.
And so round numbers, 50% of the staff are above step 7M and 50% are below step 7M.
Yeah, it looks like that. Again, what we have to do is look at the individuals and look at what their service is with obviously with the town, how they've progressed over time. All those characteristics and variables could be looked at to see where the individual falls within the range. That was not part of this study.
Okay.
Okay. But again, from my perspective, just looking at the numbers, you got 80% of your people are plus or minus 7M, right? That's pretty good. I typically don't see that high percentage around a midpoint or the market step.
Okay. Well, I'm not surprised. I feel like our town manager and the managers are very fair, but also are using the system appropriately. So I'm glad to hear that that's been validated. I guess the other question was, and I'm assuming not, because I can imagine how much it would cost to do this and how much resources it would take. But did you see any distinctions in the municipalities that you were comparing us to? So, so for instance, in Ocean City tends to have a very seasonal employment status. So they have a lot more people in Ocean City during the summer than in the winter, and so they have a lot of people in there that may not have full year jobs. And so was this an apples to apples comparison for them, or did you dig into that level?
For the most part, I think particularly for your role, it's just a full-time job. So we would not have included the part-time seasonal employees
Okay,
in the database. You know, for your job, you have full-time jobs. I'm comparing them only to full-time jobs in the other in the other governmental entities.
okay. And I guess the other thing, and I know that this was not included from having some discussions with the town manager over the last several weeks, is that this is just salary compensation and doesn't include the benefits and other perks of the job.
That's correct.
And Mr. Mayor,
Mhm.
can I ask Scott to expound on that? Because I asked the question of what impact would having richer benefits, if you will, have on this particular study? And I was actually surprised by Scott's answer.
Well, my answer is that I believe firmly that an organization has to offer a competitive wage to be able to attract individuals to that organization. And your richer benefits are a way to hopefully try to retain employees over time, particularly as they become longer service employees. That a wealthy, rich pension plan is meaningless to an entry-level laborer, right? You have to offer a competitive wage rate for a that police officer we spoke to. You have to offer a competitive wage rate to be able to attract that individual to your organization. Now, let them get 10, 12, 15 years of service with Riverdale Park. And then all of a sudden, the benefits are very meaningful as far as the retention, the ability to retain that level employee. But again, it is my opinion that organizations have to have competitive pay, and to me, competitive pay means the 50th percentile in order to be able to be better positioned to attract and retain shorter term employees, particularly in this culture and this environment we're in. You know, where the cost of labor is just going up so dramatically, you just have to stay competitive.
Okay, I guess my final question is your aging forward of the numbers from last year with a 3% bump.
Right.
That's given the inflation that we've seen, and certainly what I'm hearing, then that's pretty conservatively small number. And in reality, it's probably a lot more than that. But when July 2023 rolls around, there's going to be other pay rates are going to be higher than that.
Yeah, it's we're a little conservative in looking at structure increases into 23. That is a bit of a conservative number. You're right, but that's the other reason why the recommendation is to continue the merit increases on top of that, to help close some of that gap. As you just articulated, overall increase is going to be more than 3%. But again, with a structure adjustment and a merit increase of 2 or 2.5, you're at least taking a step towards that, closing that gap.
Okay. Any following questions or comments from council members?
Mr. Mayor, if I may.
Please.
When I was looking at reviewing over the comparisons of what the town was compared to, in terms of the counties picked, as well as especially the municipalities picked. Yeah, I remember seeing on there, I think pretty much all of those municipalities were easily with a population base anywhere from 3 to 5 times more than the town of Riverdale Park.
Except Bladensburg.
Pardon?
Bladensburg was on the list, I believe.
Bladensburg is a good size bigger than us. I mean, they're more towards that lower range, but I mean, when you look at like College Park, when you look at New Carrollton, when you look at Mount Rainier, Hyattsville, um, these are all towns that are considerably larger than we are. You know, what you don't see on that list are like the Berwyn Heights or um,
Mhm.
I'm trying to think, you know, other towns that are more close to our size.
Bladensburg is 9,500,
9,500. Okay.
so it's pretty close to us.
Yeah. Okay. I'll give that. But I mean, when we're looking at the other ones, you know, I kind of see those as, you know, being substantially bigger than we are and, you know, our taxable base
Mhm.
or their taxable base versus ours. Um, so I think one thing I think probably would have been helpful if we had a comparison of municipalities that are more like around our size, Bladensburg. Trying to think of a few others here that are around our size. They're just escaping me right now. And seeing, you know, how our pay and you know, how our pay, you know, where that where that 7M is, you know, for with that population of municipalities, as opposed to what we're seeing here with municipalities that are, you know, considerably larger.
Yeah, well, I'm not sure that that that's an important factor. I mean, you know, if Eagle Harbor is hiring a uh, public works employee, and their population is much smaller than us, and they offer more, then, you know, all things being said, probably the employee would go there rather than us if they're offering more. And so
Hmm.
it's, you know, this may explain why we are where we are, but it doesn't necessarily mean that that's where we need to be.
Okay.
Mr. Town Manager, I'm going to let Councilmember Smith go first, if that's okay.
Absolutely, sir.
Yeah, just quickly, as we look to, you know, possibly take action on this data, I would ask if we could, as mentioned before, surveyed the staff. The data is great and it's good to look at, but you know, if we're trying to decide what pay is competitive for hiring new people or keeping our own people, not asking our own people that are sitting, you know, doing the work right now and getting the pay right now seems like an oversight. So I'd like to see that.
Okay, we can discuss that, certainly. Mr. Lustician. Mr.
The-
Cornell.
Yes, the only thing I would add, sir, it was, I'll take the position that I told Scott which jurisdictions to compare us to.
Mhm.
So those were provided. Scott gave us a list of jurisdictions that we can choose from. And Paul and I, when we looked at them, we looked at who we compete with for employees.
Okay.
So we have employees who have left us and who have gone to Montgomery County. We have employees who have left us and have gone to Greenbelt. And so when we're looking for recruitment, where are people looking to go? And that was the top of mind for us in deciding. Now, Ocean City, that was a bit of an outlier. We were looking for another police department, or another jurisdiction that had a police department that was somewhat comparable. But Greenbelt, Hyattsville, Mount Rainier, all the counties listed there. We've had people go to Anne Arundel County, Prince George's County, Baltimore County. So it's really where people leave us to go, and we're viewing them as our competitors.
Okay. That makes sense. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Town Manager. Are there any public comments or questions on this presentation? Okay, Mr. Schreiber, I assume that we'll be provided copies of these slides. Will be provided to town staff. Because I need to look at some of them a little bit more time than I have right now. So
Certainly. Of course.
And we will send them out to the council, sir.
very good. Okay, thank you, Mr. Schreiber. Very interesting. A little bit worrisome as we are getting into the budget process, but we'll figure out what to do.
Very good. Very
Thank you.
good. Have a good evening then, huh?
Thanks.
too. Thank you.
Uh-huh. Bye now.
Okay, skipping ahead on the agenda, we're going to go to public comments on non-agenda items and consent agenda items. Are there any public comments? I'm not seeing any microphones go live, so let's go ahead and move to the consent agenda. May I please have a motion to approve the consent agenda item?
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Councilmember Lingua, seconded by Councilmember Smith. By our own rules, we did not discuss nor debate the consent agenda items, so we'll move immediately to a roll call vote. Councilmember Smith,
Aye.
Councilmember Foe,
Aye.
Councilmember Lingua.
Aye.
And I abstain, the motion passes 3-0. We'll move to the legislative action items next. Mr. Town Manager, before we go to item 1, what are the voting requirements for an emergency ordinance?
We actually need a supermajority, sir. And so you would need 5 affirmative votes.
Need 5 affirmative votes, and there are only 4 members of the council who are in attendance at this time, including myself.
And so Mr. Mayor, if you would, I think we can make do for the next week, and we are meeting next week for the state of the town. Perhaps we have a special legislative meeting at just prior to the state of the town. We've done that in the past, and we can present this at that time for your consideration.
Okay, can ordinance 2023-OR-05 be introduced in a non-emergency status at this time?
It can, and actually, well, it's still going to have to be an emergency ordinance, and so you could introduce it, and so next week you would be able to approve it, but you would be still approving it as an emergency ordinance, so it's effective immediately.
Okay, well, I think getting it out there as quickly as possible is a good idea in the interest of openness. So would someone like to introduce emergency ordinance 2023-OR-05? Starting on property maintenance code.
Sure. Hold on, let me pull that up. I had it and it disappeared. When the swallow come back. Capistrano. Come on, what was it? Sorry, here we go. Mr. Mayor, I'd like to introduce emergency ordinance 2023-OR-05. This is an emergency ordinance which is going to concern the an amendment to the property maintenance code, and we're doing so for the purpose of enacting an amendment to the town's property maintenance code of 2022, which is to regulate with certain exceptions the type of surface on which motor vehicles may be parked or kept or stored. It would be doing so. We would be repealing and reenacting with amendments from the Property Maintenance Code of 2022. It's section 202, general definitions. And this is from chapter 67, property maintenance 67 dash 1 as well. And this is from the code of the town of Riverdale Park, which was last revised in 2008 and as amended since. And what we'd be doing is adding the town of Riverdale to the town of Riverdale Park Property Maintenance Code, passed in 2022. Section 302.8.1, as well as to chapter 67 of the Property Maintenance Code, section 67-1. Again, from the code as the revisions made in 2008 and as amended since.
Thank you for that introduction, Councilmember Langwa. We will take it up in a special legislative next week.
Okay.
So items 2 and 3, we cannot, any of those motions would be out of order since we can't adopt them in the current population. So let's go ahead and move to agenda item 4, which requires 4 affirmative votes, but there are 4 of us here to adopt. So please, can we have staff presentation on this item before moving to a motion?
Yes.
Mm.
Hi, Mr. Mayor and council members. I'm presenting to you to seek authorization for the town manager to sign an agreement with Santos Construction Co. Inc. to construct the 54th Avenue sidewalk for an amount not to exceed $119,806, reflecting a 15% contingency. Just to give you an overview, staff released the invitation to bid for the 54th Avenue sidewalk on January 26th and received a total of 7 bids, ranging from $93,900 to $177,025. The review committee, comprising project staff and engineers, completed the review of proposals on February 24th and determined that Santos Construction Co. Inc. submitted the most responsive lowest bid with a price proposal at $104,179. Their project experience were relevant to the scope of the work that staff required to complete this project. The project is to install a 5-foot bump out from the existing curb line along the east side of 54th Avenue. It's starting from Jefferson Street and moving towards south for approximately 200 feet, then behind existing curb to its connection with the existing sidewalk to Spring Lane. This option does narrow down the roadway from 25 feet to 20 feet along the bump out, but this option avoids having to remove encroachments within a right of way, namely private fences and an existing water meter. Several small trees will also have to be removed. The budget the town has for this project was received from through reprogrammed CDBG funding from the county in 2020 for the project. The project budget is $167,500 with $150,000 funded through CDBG and the balance coming from unrestricted capital improvement program. Engineering cost total is $57,905, and it included a right-of-way survey and development of alternative project designs. 2 designs were provided to the town, each with 2 options. The remaining project budget is 109,595 with a 15% contingency. The total budget, project budget will be 119,806. Funds are available to cover this contingency. A copy of agreement is attached. Final recommendation again is to seek authorization for the town manager to sign the agreement. The agreement, a copy of agreement is attached.
Thank you. Council members, is that enough information? Is someone willing to make the motion to authorize town manager to enter into an agreement with Santos Construction for amount not to exceed $119,806 for the 54th Avenue Spring Lane Road Sidewalk Project?
Capistrano.
Mr. Mayor,
Ugh.
Yes,
I move to authorize the town manager to sign an agreement with Santos Construction Company Incorporated to construct the 54th Avenue Sidewalk project for $119,806, reflecting a 15% contingency.
thank you, Councilmember Smith. Is there a second?
Second.
Motion by Councilmember Smith, seconded by Councilmember Lingua. Is there discussion of this motion by council members?
Mr. Mayor?
Yes.
I don't know that this should require or necessitate an amendment. I'll take the town manager at his word, but can we ensure that we seek to replant 3 trees elsewhere in town as feasible?
Absolutely, sir.
Yeah.
Thank you, sir.
I was thinking exactly the same thing, that if we take them down, we should try to replace a similar number elsewhere in town.
I would imagine that's almost a given.
Any additional council comments or questions on this motion?
I have none.
Are there any public comments or questions on this motion? I'm not seeing any hands or any live mics, so I will move to a roll call vote. Councilmember Smith.
Aye.
Councilmember Foe,
Aye.
Councilmember Lingua,
Aye.
and I also vote aye, providing the 4th necessary vote for a finance matter. The motion passes. That brings us to unfinished business, Madison Hill concerns related to Parkdale High School. Is there progress to report, Mr. Town Manager?
The staff have reached out to a number of folks, inviting them to the meeting. We did receive an email this afternoon from the principal indicating that she was not able to attend. She had a previously scheduled meeting this evening. We also reached out to a member, the representative from the Board of Ed. And I believe, Marissa, are you here still?
Yes, sir, I'm here.
Did you reach someone, a supervisor from the school resource officers?
Yes, sir. Sergeant Ayers has taken time from her night tonight to be here to answer any questions that anyone may have regarding communications up there. She's actually spoken to several of the community members who spoke last week. So that's why I reached out to her. Sergeant Ayers, are you on?
I'm here. Good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
All right.
Thank you for joining us.
No problem.
So I don't know how,
Yeah.
if you want, I know, I believe Councilmember Smith and Councilmember Lingua maybe had questions last time regarding efforts up there with the students, but she is up there working with the school SRO. She may be able to offer some clarity about what's going on up there.
Ms. Ayers, I did not catch your title. Was it Sergeant?
I'm Sergeant Ayers with the Prince George's County Police Department. I am the supervisor for all of the SROs, meaning the school resource officers in the northern county, the northern side of the county. So I have schools ranging from, what's that considered, District Heights area, all the way up to the Montgomery County line. And Parkdale is one of the schools that fall under my responsibility. So I'm open to answer any questions that you may have in reference to the students. And I can share with you the information that I've already went over with one of your town persons, Ms. Donna Holland, who raised a concern to Director Cunningham, who I work hand in hand with from Safety and Security of the School Board, and also to Dr. Golson. So whatever you guys have questions about that I can answer, I'm your open book right now.
Okay, thank you. Council members, do you have questions? Would we like to sort of get a summary of the discussion with Ms. Holland? Thoughts?
Yeah, I would appreciate that.
So Sergeant Ayers, can you please give us sort of a brief summary of your discussion with Ms. Ayers?
Yes, so I was made aware of Ms. Holland's concerns about the students cutting through her backyard back in January of this year. I see that her emails date all the way back from November of 2022, where she had emailed all the way up to the superintendent of the school board. The superintendent, asked Director of Security, Mr. Cunningham, to look into it. And because this falls under my area, it got handed down to me. So I did go to Ms. Donna's house. I actually, walked her property to see where her issue is, where she's coming from, because the videos that she submitted, I couldn't get a grasp of what she was saying via her videos. So I took the time and I went out there. I do understand her concern, where the kids are walking down the wooden hill from the Parkdale sits up higher than the Madison Hill homes. And they are walking down the back hill through the wood line and cutting through the homes to get further down the street into the community. I then went to the top of the street that's more so on Good Luck, where the houses begin to see, like, what are those people doing up there to prevent the kids from walking through? And all of their homes are fenced in. I then went to the back of the school to see what the school has done to prevent them from going through the backside of the school down into the neighborhood. So the school does have a fence that goes along the entire fence, the entire wood line of the school and the woods that's adjacent to the back of the homes. However, there's nothing that fence can connect to that's on school property. So even if they are to extend the fence, there's nothing that prevents the kids from walking around the fence. And they walk through there so often that it's their own little path through there. So there's nothing that can prevent them from going through there. I have talked to Dr. Graves, the principal at Parkdale. She has sent letters home to the families to advise them. She has done them on the little PS things that they do when they send the Mad Blast home. She has done them over the phone. She has made announcements at the end of the night, end of the school day during dismissal. And these kids are choosing to walk the way that they choose to walk. I did meet with Miss Donna the first day I went there. She wasn't home, so I scheduled a meeting with her the next day, which was January 12th. And I sat and I talked to her for about 45 minutes. And her concern is that even if she does put up a fence around her house and she's sitting on her porch, she will still be able to see them coming down the hill and walking around her fence or the adjacent home to her home. So I do understand that. Her main concern was getting a retention wall built where they couldn't even come into the neighborhood from the backside. I explained to her that's not anything that the police department would do. That's not anything the school board would do, because the school has their fence on their property line. And the property line behind her house is between, from my understanding, it's a argument between who owns the wood line, if it's Riverdale Park, if it's Park Police, if it's the county, and no one is claiming ownership of that piece of the woods. And so she did advise me that they do pay a HOA fee there at Madison Hill. So I advised her to get in contact with her HOA president to see where their fees are going and to see if they can get a vote in to build a retaining wall for those who find this to be an issue. As far as the school or the school board doing anything further than what they have already done, I highly doubt that. We have fences amongst other schools that have holes in it that the students continually cut down, or people just break through, and those haven't been fixed because they continuously get done over and over again. So I can bet my bottom dollar and my entire paycheck that they're not going to spend money on a housing, situation that's not their property when they have their own things to fix on their property.
Okay, thank you for that summary. Council members, do you have questions for Sergeant Ayers?
Mr. Mayor.
Please, Councilmember Smith, go ahead.
Sergeant Ayers, thanks for being here. Thanks for your presentation and updates on your correspondence and interactions over this issue. In your professional opinion, what is the level of threat to public safety caused by this issue?
There has been no threats reported to us as far as the students harming anyone in the neighborhood or anything like this. This is simply just annoyance.
What about I'm sorry, go ahead.
I understand the annoyance, because if I'm sitting in my backyard, I don't want to see students walking through my property or adjacent to my property. I want to sit in my backyard and enjoy the fruits of my labor. So no one is saying that any of this is a threat. They're more annoyed by the situation than anything.
Thank you. And what about the students themselves? Other than being unsupervised minors, is there anything in that area that is a threat to their safety as they move through that area?
I wouldn't say anything is a threat to them going through the wood line. It's more of a shortcut, so they don't have to walk towards Good Luck Road, get on Good Luck Road, and then walk all the way back down. I want to say that street is Silk Tree, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, instead of them walking out of the school, up the hill, walking Good Luck Road, and then walking back down Silk Tree, it's more of a convenience for them to cut through these people's yards.
Understood. Thank you, Sergeant Ayers.
Additional council questions?
Mr. Mayor, if I may,
Please go ahead, Mr. Councilmember Lindblom.
thank you. Ms. Ayers, thank you very much for the presentation and the effort you've made with the resident and with the school. Growing up as a kid, when we'd go to and from school, anytime we were going through someone's yards, because we had the express permission from the resident that allowed us to take that shortcut. And we were very mindful and respectful of the property. I kind of see this for the residents up there. This, as you said, they want to enjoy the fruits of their labor. They also, I think, what they just want is a basic right to privacy back there, without having to have people trespass on the property. It seems from what you're saying, really, until someone puts up persuasion and simple requests home to parents is going to proving ineffective. It's probably nothing short of someone putting up a barrier of some type to prevent students from traversing that route. Is that your assessment?
I'm sorry, was there a question in there?
Is it your assessment that short of, if I mean, from what you've said, letters have been sent home. Schools trying to do everything that they can. And that if students are still just cutting through, is it your assessment that unless some type of barrier is put up, this is just going to keep continuing?
Pretty much. So
Okay.
I want to address what you first initially said. You said back when you were in school, and I'm not trying to age anybody on this call. I'm probably the youngest one on this call, but
I'm old. Don't worry.
okay.
It's okay.
Here I stand at 35 years old, and I graduated from high school in 2005. I graduated college in 2009, and I
Right.
walk in these schools every single day. And it's not a day that I walk in there that I'm not totally flabbergasted by the things that I see coming from these students.
Okay.
So when I say that to say that majority of them are respectful kids, but the mass majority of them are not respectful kids. They don't respect authority. They don't respect adults. They hardly respect their own parents. And
Okay.
so Miss Donna has expressed to me that, if she does say something to these kids, that's when, the cuss words get to flying. So she just doesn't say anything. And so with how impulsive people are in general in the world today, there's no saying, what can happen. My best option or my best idea for her is the retaining wall, because I don't see them wanting to climb a wall over and over both ways during the day. Now you'll have some that may try to climb this wall depending upon how tall it is, but I'm pretty sure they would get annoyed having to climb this wall instead of just, walking the original way that they need to walk. And so, yes, the best option for them, either fence each individual house up where they won't be able to cut through the houses, because it makes no sense for Miss Donna to fence her house in, but then the
Right.
next person don't, because then it's just going to shift down and down and down.
Sure.
So if they want to do a collaborative effort where everybody say, hey, I'm putting up my fence and I'm gonna put up my fence and I'm gonna put up my fence, and so everybody has fences up, then okay. But if not, then it's my best opinion that the HOA is going to have to come together and do whatever they're doing with their funds that they're turning in monthly to help them get a retainer wall, and that's tall enough that students won't be able to climb or go over on a daily basis.
Okay. Okay.
Any additional questions, Councilmember Lingua?
No, that's all. Thank you.
Okay, are there any questions from or comments from members of the public? I'm not seeing any microphones or hands, so Sergeant Ayers, if I could ask some questions about issues that that Ms. Holland brought up last week and the weeks before.
It looks
that.
like Leo Dorsey has his hand up.
Mr. Dorsey, yes, please go ahead.
Hi, yeah, this is Leo Dorsey. I just want to express my appreciation for all the work you're doing. And again, like, I'm sure this is a difficult situation, and the fact that there is obviously the balance between protecting the students' needs and the administration's needs. My question, I guess, is, and apologies if I missed this, what specifically the administration has recommended, if you've reached out to them, if they have any recommendations for community members, or if there's anything that you've gleaned from your conversations with them that you could recommend to the town. Thank you.
The recommendation from the school was to fence the property in, be it the retainer wall or the individual fences. The school has done what they deem is their part by putting up their fence. Because like I said, their fence can go all the way down to Good Luck Road. The kids will either hop their fence or cut a hole in it and go around. It's one part of the fence that's behind the temporaries that they have cut a hole in that needs to be fixed. So they've put their fence up on their end, on their property line. And so the best suggestion from the school board is for the homeowners to fence their property in to protect their property.
Does that answer your question, Mr. Dorsey?
Yes, it does. Thank you.
Of course. Mr. Janifer?
Yeah, thanks. I actually live right across the street from Miss Holland. So I don't get the the severity of the problem as much as she does, but I've been living here for 20 years and it's been a problem for 20 years. I'm just wondering, the school has said that they send letters home, and is that the extent of what they can do? I mean, they send a letter, they know that the letters may not be as effective. I'm just wondering if there's any other level of at least accountability from the school. I understand the fact that they can only make certain physical adjustments, but I would think some type of administrative action could be ramped up, to at least let the residents know that they're trying something more than they've tried before.
Okay, so just so I'm clear, that the school cannot render any type of punishment to any students off school property that is not on a school bus. Now, if something happens on a school bus, then they can render, some type of discipline. But something that happens in a neighborhood, the school is not responsible for that, especially if they already advised them. And they can advise them, all they want, but once they're outside of that building and they choose to walk through there, there's nothing that the school can enforce to say, hey, here's your reprimand for walking through this community, because it's not a violation from the school or something that happened in reference to the school. So we can't ask people that work for the school to discipline a student for something that doesn't happen at school.
Understood. But seeing that the police department is responsible for the safety of the community, could there be a patrol every now and then or something? I'm sure if a student or two were made an example of, that could be a deterrent.
My school resource officer, who is up there every single day from the time that those kids arrive at the school to the time that they leave the school, he is responsible for the safety and security of the kids. So the plans that we have put in place since I've been working here, and that's since October of last year, he parks his cruiser at that gate to try to deter them from going there. But he's only one officer in charge of an entire student body, whatever the population is at Parkdale High School. So he can't be everywhere at one time. So my officer's main concern is making sure that the kids that's getting on the school buses and that's releasing are not engaging in physical altercations with each other and are making it on the bus safely. Now, once they release the walkers, his cruiser is back there to try to deter them from walking back there, but he's only one guy. He can only be at one place at one time. As far as patrolling, I don't know if you know that the Prince George's County Police Department, we are short about 300 officers, if not more right now. And I don't even have coverage for all of my schools right now. So with that being said, we don't have like a slew or leftover officers that's not doing anything that can then go and just sit at Parkdale's, release and say, hey, Mr. Kid, don't walk this way. You're going to piss off the neighborhood. You have to walk this way. We don't have a slew of officers that can do that. So as far as, the deterrent, I understand what you're saying. And I feel like I know your next question is going to be, what about, trespassing and the charges in reference to that? Let me make that clear as well. The state's attorney's office isn't even prosecuting for what we say is violent crimes. It's no way that they're prosecuting or taking juveniles in for trespassing. It's just not going to happen at the state's attorney's office. So there's no example to be made. If we call DJS, which is the Department of Juvenile Services, and say, hey, we want to commit this child for trespassing, DJS will literally look at the phone and laugh at us and no, it's not happening, unfortunately.
We appreciate the time you've taken. My wife is with me here. She just has one real quick question.
Yes, sir. Yes, ma'am.
Hi, this is Mrs. Jennifer.
Hi.
My husband and I, we both work from home. So these students it's not just when they're going to school or leaving a school. They are actually, it's almost like truancy. It's like usually about 10 to 12 of them during the day. Like right after, it's like they check in homeroom and then they come through the neighborhood. They're down in the tot lot. Somebody's waiting for them sometimes to pick them up, or they're just hanging down in the tot lot. So at this point, it's like, do we call the police because they're doing more than trespassing? They're being truant.
Yeah, so there's times that
do we call Riverdale and work hand in hand?
So there's times that my officer goes out, he does at least 3 truancy checks during his day at the school. He will run into a gang of students, and as soon as they see him coming, they take off running. It's cat and mouse with most of these students, and it's crazy because it's when they're at the school, some of them aren't going to class, so it's like, what are you here for? But then when it's time to go home, it's like, okay, go home. It's a game of cat and mouse, and some of them are just uncontrollable. I've run into them just standing at the bus stop, and as soon as they see me coming down the street, they'll run across the street, they'll run down the hill, they'll run, and it's a slew of them. So it's like, our hands are just as tied as everybody else's. Some of them aren't so disobedient, and they'll, stay, or they'll get in the cars and or they'll even walk back down Good Luck Road as I'm driving down the street behind them, making sure that they go back to the school. But it's some of them that they don't listen to their parents, so they're not going to listen to us. And once again, we can charge them, we can write up all the paperwork for truancy, but when there's no repercussions from the state's attorney's office and no repercussions from the school board itself, then our hands are tied. Like I said earlier, I'm probably the youngest one on this call. When I was in school, if we bought a knife to school, or if we bought, anything illegal or whatever to school, it was an expulsion. Now the school principals, they can't even expel students. They have to request an expulsion, and that has to get sent up to the school board. And the school board is like, oh, give them another chance. But you guys aren't here to deal with them. We are. So it's kind of a pacifying situation that all the innocent people have to deal with. And it's sad, because it's sad for the students who's actually in school to learn and have to deal with it. The teachers that's actually there to teach and have to deal with it. It's a nuisance, but when everybody's hands are tied, or when the final decisions aren't in our hands, what are we to do?
Thank you.
Mr. Dorsey, your hand is up. Is that left up? Do you have another question or comment? Okay. then.
Sorry, that was an older thing. I did want to just raise again, I completely sympathize with the gravity of the situation. It really, my wife works at the formerly worked at the juvenile detention center in DC and grappled with students who were often feeling more protected in juvenile setting than a typical school setting. You know, if there are constructive solutions that you can recommend to the town or to community residents, as you come across them, I would, you know, I don't have any specific questions, but if there are those that come up, or if there's, you know, situations where you're seeing particular threats or solutions, I would just ask that you raise those with the town, because I think from what I'm hearing, at least as a resident, I think the town is willing to work with the school and willing to work with the school resource officers. And if there's something that comes about, or if students seem to be, or parents seem to be more willing to work with certain solutions, then that I think that would be something that, you know, we can work towards. But again, I understand, you know, it's a difficult situation. I just hope that there's a solution out there. Over.
Why you brought that up? I do remember telling Miss Donna, and I'm not by any means saying follow these kids home, but let's just say, for instance, you see a kid walking through or cutting through and going to a particular home. I mean, it may be worth knocking on that door and having a conversation with that parent. They may not know that their kid is cutting through, you know, your yard, and they know how hard they work for their fruits of their labor. So they might just not know that their kid is walking through there. And maybe that conversation can be had with said parent, and that parent may talk to their kid like, we don't want anybody walking through our yard, so don't do that to the next person. And so that is an option if you feel comfortable. I'm not saying by no means watch the kid and go with some binoculars and go see what house they're going to, and then, you know, none of that, but it may be worth, you know, a neighbor to neighbor conversation just to inform them, hey, your kid is walking through.
Councilmember Smith, your hand is up.
Yeah, just, you know, I'm thinking about myself at that age as someone who was, you know, before I was in the Army for 5 years, would very likely to be one of these kids cutting class, running through the woods and cussing out the neighbors. You know, the thing that would have been the most effective for keeping me from doing that in this area would be a bunch of grown-ups hanging out, playing music, drinking soda pop, saying, hey, kids, come out, hang out with us. You would never see me cutting through those woods or in that park again. I'm wondering if that's something that you've seen maybe effective just for the community itself to have a presence in the area.
But you have, if you're going to go that route, you have to think about the time that these kids are cutting through. I know at the time that they will be cutting through, if at the time that they're cutting through the houses there in Madison Hill, if that was the same time here at my home, no one's here, because I gotta work. They keep my fruits of my labor. So I don't have time to sit at home and watch and sit on my porch and drink soda pop and say, hey kid, you're walking through my yard.
No, I get that. It's just, if we're looking for solutions, and the thing, you know, the reason we're here is because the ideas that have been put forward like haven't worked, or for some structural reason won't work, right? And so we got to think outside the box. And I know that's easy for me to say, not living in that neighborhood, but it just seems that it would be effective if you know, it's a lot cheaper than the neighborhood banding together to build fences or construct a retaining wall for folks to, you know, maybe 1 or 2 days a week, this neighbor, that neighbor is just having a presence out there. You know, it may sound silly, but, you know, having been one of these delinquent kids in my past, and gotten in significant amounts of trouble for it, there is nothing that would be more effective in keeping me out of that area than grown-ups there wanting me to come hang out with them.
Interesting thought, Councilmember Smith. I was trying to think of some creative ideas we might have to address this issue. The Jannifers, Mr. and Mrs. Jannifer asked all the questions that I had for you, Sergeant Ayers, so I will simply repeat the thanks that other people have said for you putting the effort and time into talking to Ms. Holland and the other residents of Silk Tree about this. And I appreciate you also letting me know. I had heard that there were issues with truancy and that it was difficult to enforce, and now I understand that a lot better. And so I appreciate you taking the time to explain that situation also.
You're welcome, no problem.
Okay, unless there are any other quick questions, then we should let Sergeant Ayers go.
Thank you, Sergeant.
Thank you, Sergeant.
Thank
No
you, Sergeant.
problem.
Thank you, Sergeant Ayers.
No problem. Good night.
Okay, Councilmember Foe is ill.
Thank you.
Sergeant Ayers.
Councilmember Foe let me know that he did not sleep last night because of his illness and doesn't have much time left. So let's go ahead. I don't believe we have anything to vote on under new business, so let's go ahead and move into new business at this time.
No, I think the only
And
item
just-
of new business, it would be a quick, simple vote, is what, Mr. Mayor, what you and I ran into when we stopped by Congressman Ivy's office regarding the town taking a position of support for the relocation of the Federal Bureau of Investigation to Prince George's County, and sending off a letter of support to Congressman's office, as well as the Senator's office, as well as Congressman Hoyer's office, and GSA and the White House.
Okay, we have an item on the agenda under new business, so I will take, unless someone objects, and I'll say we can insert this item ahead of that item under new business. Councilmember Foe, if you can hang on for just a few minutes, since no one is objecting, I'll take that as unanimous consent to insert this item as before the item that's on the written agenda. So, Councilmember Lingo, would you like to make a motion that the town send a letter of support to Representative Ivy's office for the FBI moving to Prince George's County with copies to be distributed, as you said in your testimony?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Is there any discussion among the council for this item?
Just briefly, this is something that's been a long time planning by the federal government and got delayed the start of 2017. And it's now back on being addressed. I think there are a number of folks in Prince George's County, as well as in Maryland in general, would like to see the Bureau's headquarters moved up to this area. And letters of support as such gives validation to the point that the representatives are making when they're advocating for its relocation here, that you're seeing community support for such a move.
Okay, thank you, Councilmember. Any additional council comments or public comments on this motion? Okay, and Councilmember, I presume that I should sign this letter, is that correct?
Oh, absolutely, Mr. Mayor. Absolutely.
Okay, hearing no additional comments, he'll do a roll call vote. Councilmember Smith,
Aye.
Councilmember Foe,
Aye.
Councilmember Lingua.
Aye.
And I abstain, the motion passes 3-0. Are there any additional items of new business requiring a vote this evening? Okay, I think we should let Councilmember Foe go and try to get well.
Get some shut eye.
Thank you, everyone. I appreciate that. Have a good evening and a good week.
Take
Well
care.
soon, Councilman.
Mend well.
Okay, sidewalk cafe standards. Would you like to discuss those, Mr. Town Manager, with the members of council that are remaining?
Yes, Ryan, I'll defer to you, sir.
Absolutely. Good evening, Mayor and Council. Staff are seeking feedback regarding establishment of a sidewalk cafe program and standards. To use space beyond what was initially approved by the county issued U&O, the business would need to amend their U&O, and this amendment would require a letter of authorization from the property to use the property from the town. So if a restaurant was interested in using some of the public space adjacent to their storefront, for example, they would need to have a letter authorizing them from the town. Pardon me. In 2020, the county created a temporary outdoor seating program that assisted restaurant owners. This program provided an expedited process for businesses, and staff have contacted the county to see if this program is still in effect. This program would require a license agreement between the business and the town for the town-owned property. And an agreement would have standards for sidewalk furniture, planters, tables, chairs, umbrellas, and space heaters, among other things. These standards would not only ensure the aesthetics of the space, but also ensure the safety and accessibility of the space. And staff are seeking input on the following. If the program should only be available to businesses that are directly adjacent to the public space, should the town establish a review committee comprised of members of the LMUTC Design Committee? Should members of such a review committee provide input on aesthetic standards? And should members of such a review committee review applications for licensing agreement? Or if there are any opinions or input on these questions or others, staff would be eager to hear them. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Director Chelton. Council comments. Councilmember Lingua, I see your mic is live. Just go ahead.
My mic is live. I think it's a fair approach as long as it's kept fairly straightforward, simple. Essentially, anything that avoids the unofficial state motto of Maryland, that being, if you can dream it, we can tax it. I think being able to provide, as stated, designated and having standards met for the type of seating to be outdoors, that would work both well for the community as well as the business, I think is fine. Because it's just something that's going to help the business generate more activity, more customers, which in turn just is a benefit for everybody in the area. So if it's
Councilmember
kept
Smith?
simple,
Okay.
go for it.
I mean, I think my comments are similar to Council Member Lingua's. I think if they are meeting the county standards, I would hate to think that we would make one of our town processes more onerous than the county's. So, if we need a committee and that's what's required and everything, I understand that, but I would just hope we can make the processes simple and painless as possible. I know we have businesses that are seeking to do this now. Businesses that are thriving and, might outgrow their space soon, and the ability for us to offer this option would help keep them in our town. And I would also note that specifically in the town center area, as we move closer towards the revitalization project of that area, we have the ability to construct, the sidewalks, the pedestrian infrastructure there such that it would, be it would facilitate this kind of outdoor dining. So I hope we take that into account, and I think it's an added benefit that we have that project coming up, that whatever standards we agree to, we can ensure that the infrastructure there is constructed to that end.
Thank you, Councilmember Smith. Are there public comments on this, in this discussion? Ms. Katz.
Thank you, Mayor. I really like what Councilmember Smith just said regarding planning ahead for infrastructure, but my only comment right now is the current situation in front of some businesses in town center aren't very conducive to pedestrian access, as well as having the outdoor seating. Just if this is implemented sooner than later, just if consideration would be made to some of those current challenges.
Thank you for your comments, Ms. Katz. Mr. Town Manager.
The only thing I would add, sir, and this predates Mr. Chelton's time with the town, turning to the membership of the MUTC committee is something that we have done before as it relates to improvements on public property. The committee members gathered to decide what type of bike racks should be in that public space, and coming up with some sort of aesthetic standards for the types of furniture. I imagine all the business owners have their own concept of what appropriate furnishings would be. But since there'd be improvements to the public space, the staff would strongly recommend that the members of the MUTC or LMUTC committee come up with a standard for predictability, so we can have ease of process in that, but also so the public spaces share a continuity, if you will, of appearance.
Thank you, Mr. Town Manager. Additional council or public comments on this topic? Well, I will weigh in. I believe that the MUTC development plan for town center actually has some guidance on street furniture. I know that it has guidance on the structure of the streetscape. So what space should be where, and where street furniture should be placed if it's there. And I believe it has some guidance on the type of street furniture and so on. I think the general idea was that it not be $5 plastic chairs from Home Depot. And so I think taking a quick run through that, I don't think there are any mandatory standards. I don't think that street furniture would actually go before the Legacy MUTC committee for the areas of town that are in question. The other sort of statement is that it would be good to see if there might be requests coming from places outside of the historic town center, that there may be other parts of town that are making requests. It may be that up in the Riverdale Park Station, that once the streets transfer, that there might be some request to convert a parking space or two into on-street dining. And so any program that we develop should at least have some thought put towards this happening elsewhere in town. And I think that that establishing an ad hoc or informal committee where we invite members of the Legacy Metsy to be members would be a good idea. We, of course, they are appointed by the county, and so by Parks and Planning, and so Planning Board, and so we can't require them to do anything, but I think they are all community-minded people and would be happy to weigh in and help develop such standards. So those are my thoughts. Any additional comments?
I have none.
Okay. That brings us to the end of the legislative agenda. And we have a whole bunch of reports to get through. And I realized that we did not adopt the finance report while we still had a quorum. So we will need to do that in the special legislative next week also.
I was just about to suggest that.
Very good. Okay, so let's roll back up to the top. Proclamation recognizing Ethics Awareness Month. And let me find that proclamation. Get it to where I can actually read it. Okay, I'm just going to read it through in order. Proclamation 2023 Ethics Awareness Month, whereas elected and appointed officials and public employees recognize that their chosen profession is built upon the public's trust. And whereas elected and appointed officials and public employees may earn the trust of their communities by adhering to high standards of ethical and moral conduct. And whereas the town of Riverdale Park has established an ethics commission and provided guidance to elected and appointed officials and employees through the adoption of Chapter 32 Ethics. And whereas the town of Riverdale Park recognizes the International City County Management Association's Code of Ethics as the standard for proper public administration, and has distributed copies of this Code of Ethics to all elected and appointed officials and employees of the town. And whereas an awareness of ethical standards and programs helps to promote a strong public image and maintain a moral course. And whereas the International City County Management Association, the National League of Cities, the U.S. Conference of Mayors, and numerous other national and state municipal management associations encourage their members to strengthen and abide by certain ethical standards. Therefore, be it resolved that the town of Riverdale Park Mayor and Council do hereby proclaim March 2023 as Ethics Awareness Month in Riverdale Park and call upon the elected and appointed officials, public employees, residents, government agencies, and all other individuals and institutions in the town or who would conduct business in the town to recognize the importance of ethical conduct in our community and to commit to increasing awareness and understanding of the ethical principles that should guide our professional and personal interactions with one another. Y ahora en español, Proclamación, Mes de Concientización Ética 2023. Por cuanto los funcionarios y empleados públicos elegidos y designados reconocen que su profesión elegida se basa en la confianza del público, y por cuanto los funcionarios y empleados públicos elegidos y designados pueden ganarse la confianza de sus comunidades al adherirse a altos estándares de conducta ética y moral, y considerando que el pueblo de Riverdale Park ha establecido una comisión de ética y ha brindado orientación a funcionarios y empleados electos y designados mediante la adopción del capítulo 32, ética, y considerando que el pueblo de Riverdale Park reconoce el código de ética de la Asociación Internacional de Administración de Ciudad Condada como el estándar para la administración pública apropiada y ha distribuido copias de este código de ética a todos los funcionarios electos y designados y empleados del pueblo, y considerando que la conciencia de los estándares y programas éticos ayuda a promover una imagen pública fuerte y mantener un curso moral, y por cuanto la Asociación Internacional de Administración de Ciudades Condadas la Liga Nacional de Ciudades, la Conferencia de Alcaldes de Estados Unidos y muchas otras asociaciones de administración municipal nacionales y estatales alientan a sus miembros a fortalecer y atenerse a ciertos estándares éticos. Por lo tanto, se resuelve que el alcalde y el consejo de la ciudad de Riverdale Park proclaman marzo de 2023 como el mes de concientización de ética en Riverdale Park y convocan a los funcionarios elegidos y designados, empleados públicos, residentes, agencias gubernamentales y todas las demás personas y instituciones en la ciudad o quienes realizan negocios en la ciudad para reconocer la importancia de la conducta ética en nuestra comunidad y comprometerse a aumentar la conciencia y la comprensión de los principios éticos que deben guiar nuestras interacciones profesionales y personales entre nosotros. Muchas gracias. And now, proclamation in honor of Women's History Month 2023. Whereas Women's History Month has been observed annually during the month of March in the United States since 1987, and whereas women of every age, ethnicity, nationality, parental status, physical, mental, and developmental ability, race, religion, sexual orientation, skin color, status, have made historic contributions to the growth and strength of our communities in countless recorded and unrecorded ways. And whereas women have played and continue to play critical economic, cultural, and social roles in every sphere of life by constituting a significant proportion of the labor force working inside and outside of the home. And whereas the 2023 Women's History Month theme, as designated by the National Women's History Alliance, is providing healing, promoting hope, and is a tribute to the ceaseless work of caregivers and frontline workers during the ongoing pandemic, and also recognition of the thousands of ways that women of all cultures have promoted both healing and hope throughout history. And whereas women were vital in the establishment of early charitable, philanthropic, and cultural institutions in our country and continue to be, and whereas women served as early leaders in the forefront of every major progressive social change movement and continue to lead the way as champions of social and economic justice, and whereas women have been leaders not only in securing their own rights of suffrage and equal opportunity, but also in the abolitionist movement, the emancipation movement, the industrial labor movement, the civil rights movement, and other movements, especially the peace movement, which create a more fair and just society for all. And whereas despite these contributions, the role of women throughout history and still today has been consistently overlooked and undervalued in literature, teaching, and study of American history. Now therefore be it resolved that the town of Riverdale Park Mayor and Council do hereby proclaim March as Women's History Month and call on everyone in our community to observe March as Women's History Month with appropriate programs, ceremonies, and activities. Ahora en español, proclamación, una proclamación en honor al mes de la historia de la mujer 2023. Considerando que el mes de la historia de la mujer se ha observado anualmente durante el mes de marzo en los Estados Unidos desde 1987, considerando que mujeres en todas las edades, etnicidad, nacionalidad, estado parental, capacidad física, mental y de desarrollo, raza, religión, orientación sexual, color de piel y estatus socioeconómico, ha hecho contribuciones históricas al crecimiento y fortaleza de nuestras comunidades en innumerables formas registradas y no registradas. Y considerando que las mujeres han desempeñado y siguen desempeñando funciones económicas, culturales y sociales críticas en todas las esferas de la vida al constituir una parte significativa de la fuerza laboral que trabaja dentro de la fuera y dentro y fuera del hogar, y considerando que el tema del mes de la historia de la mujer 2023, designado por la Alianza Nacional de Historia de la Mujer, es proporcionar sanación, promover la esperanza, y es un tributo al trabajo incesante de los ciudadanos y trabajadores del primera línea durante la pandemia en curso y también el reconocimiento de las miles de formas en que las mujeres de todas las culturas han proporcionado tanto corazón como esperanza a lo largo de la historia, y considerando que las mujeres fueron vitales en el establecimiento de las primeras instituciones caritativas, filantrópicas y culturales en nuestro país y continúan siéndolo, y considerando que las mujeres sirvieron como líderes tempranas en la vanguardia de cada importante movimiento progresista del cambio social y continúan liderando al camino como campeones de la justicia social y económica, y considerando que las mujeres han sido líderes no solo en la garantía de sus propios derechos de sufragio e igualdad de oportunidades, sino también en el movimiento abolicionista, el movimiento de emancipación, el movimiento obrero industrial, el movimiento de derechos civiles y otros movimientos, especialmente el movimiento por la paz, que crean una sociedad más justa y equitativa para todos. Y considerando que a pesar de estas contribuciones, el papel de la mujer a lo largo de la historia y aún hoy ha sido sistemáticamente pasado por alto e infravalorado en la literatura, la enseñanza y el estudio de la historia de América. Y ahora, por lo tanto, se resuelve que el alcalde y el consejo de la ciudad de River Park proclamen marzo como el mes de la historia de la mujer y llaman a todos en nuestra comunidad a observar marzo como el mes de la historia de la mujer con programas, ceremonias y actividades apropiadas. Muchas gracias. Y excuse me for stumbling over a few words. That brings us to presentation on expenditures, fiscal year 2023 estimated actuals, fiscal year 2024 projections. Jennifer Jones, Deputy Director of Finance Services. Mr. Deputy Director.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Good evening, members of council and members of the public. So to begin, the report tonight covers the estimated actuals for fiscal year 2023, as well as the fiscal year 2024 projections. So the major categories that we will cover tonight are the contractual services and operating expenditures as well. At this point, we are still in the process of completing and working on the salaries and benefits portion. But we hope to have that within like the next week or so. So as of now, the total fiscal year 2024 projection is still to be determined. So for the first major category, we have total contractual services. And for this portion, we have all of the contractual services broken down by major departments, starting with mayor and council and ending with public works. So for an estimated actual, we have a total of $1,452,000, which is actually about 19% more than the approved budget amount of $1,172,775. For fiscal year 2024, we have a proposed amount of $1,201,000, $28,000 increase at about 2.4%. So the main reason why this particular category has an estimated actual that exceeds the budgeted amount is due to the speed camera revenue. And that would be line 103.04, which is community safety programs. We have an estimated actual of 659,000. The approved budget amount was 357,000. So the estimated actual that we have is will exceed the approved budget amount by 302,000. And we are expected to be over due to an increase in speed camera revenues. As the revenues go up, the expenditures do as well. When putting together the budget, we were conservative with our estimates for revenue and expenditures. Again, we never want to rely on speed camera revenue as it is a very unpredictable revenue source. So we are conservative. But with that said, in come May, we anticipate having to request a budget amendment to increase that line item there to raise the total contractual services to a total of $1,452,000. And for the next fiscal year, we've increased that rate to 375,000. Again, remaining conservative with our projections. The next major category that we have is operating expenses. We have an estimated actual of 906,000 with an approved budget amount of 972,000. So staff have done a great job as far as limiting expenditures as we move forward, finding out that we have about 420,000 less in operating revenue due to that tangible property tax. With the threshold changing, it's been increasingly important that we are very conservative with our spending, and we continue to do so. For the next fiscal year, we have a projected amount of $1,018,918, which is an increase of 46,000, 4.56% increase. The next category that we have is other operating expenditures. The budgeted amount that we had for fiscal year 2023 was 248,000. And then we have an estimated actual of just 102,000. The reason for this, we have savings in administrative services as well as public works. So for administrative services, when putting together the budget last year, due to all the uncertainty, we actually placed a 113,000 contingency amount for emergencies. And at this point, we do not anticipate having to use that revenue. So we have 113,000 in savings there. Additionally, in public works, we have an estimated actual of 68,000 with a budgeted amount of 100,550. We do have some savings on streetlights of about 32,000, and we anticipate expending all of that in fiscal year 2024 due to taking on more lights in Riverdale Park Station. So we have a projected amount for fiscal year 2024 of 100,550. So overall, that total other operating expenditures, we have a fiscal year 2024 proposed amount of 248,000, which is consistent with what we have in the current fiscal year. Next category that we have is weather response services. We have a budgeted amount for the current fiscal year of 26,000. An estimated actual coming in very close at 25,000. And we're actually increasing the proposed amount for fiscal year 2024 to 28,000. So a $2,000 increase there. For town buildings, town hall, we have a total for the current fiscal year of 26,000 with a budgeted amount of 23,400. And for fiscal year 2024, we have a proposed amount of 26,550, which represents an increase of 3,150. For public safety, we have a budgeted amount of 27,900 with an estimated actual of 28,000 and a proposed amount of 29,500. And the last building is Public Works. We have a budgeted amount of 35,000. We actually have some savings there, and we with an estimated actual of 26,934. And we actually, with that, we have a proposed amount of 30,500. The next category we have is community events. So we do have some savings here. We have a budgeted amount of 41,200 for the current fiscal year with an estimated actual of 20,700. Due to some restrictions, some of the town sponsored events will not be taking place this year. So we have some savings there, but we are keeping the budget at 41,200 for community events. The last category that we have here is community grants. We have a budgeted amount of 80,850. We have an estimated actual of 74,684, and we will keep that rate flat for the next fiscal year, a total of 80,850. So overall, if we look at our expenditures, as we continue to be conservative, we have an estimated actual of 8,443,737 and a budget of 8,774,595. So at this point, with our estimated actuals, we're actually coming in under the budgeted amount. We found some savings in various accounts, as well as some savings where we have some vacant positions, and we feel that we will land at 8,443,000. So at this point, again, we are still working on the salaries and figuring out where we're going to land there. So we don't have a total expenditure figure tonight, but that's something that the budget team and staff will continue to work on. And we hope to have an update for you shortly. So yeah, that concludes the estimated actuals in fiscal year 2024 projections. If there are any questions regarding any of the information that we've discussed tonight, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Deputy Director Jones. Councilmember Smith, you have your hand up. Please go ahead.
Yeah, thank you for that presentation, Mr. Jones, as always. Could you say more about the on the automated enforcement? You mentioned that as revenues go up, our expenditures on it go up as well. Could you clarify that for me?
Yes. So the way that the speed camera work is that each time that a car is flagged, there is a set price. So as we have more speeding cars and more cars are flagged, the expenditures go up as well per vehicle.
Does the expenditure go up like
in proportion to the revenue? So as the revenue goes up, the expenditure side is going to go up as well.
Just by the same amount?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. All right. Gotcha. Thank you.
Any additional questions or comments for Deputy Director Jones?
Mr. Mayor, if I can make a comment.
Please.
Just want to thank Gentry for putting this together, and Paul and the rest of the staff. As we discussed with you all, we anticipate a loss of revenue in the current year. I asked all the department heads to find some modest cuts in the current year budget, and then coupled with the vacancy savings and the budgeted contingency. It's nice when everyone just comes together and says, okay, here's our target. How do we achieve that? And so I want to commend the whole leadership team, Mr. Jones in particular, for guiding us through the nuts and bolts of this. And then the projected amounts for next year, They are subject to change, as Gentry had said. And a lot of that's going to depend on where we land on salary, the salary scale, as well as factoring in the workers' compensation. We're going with a rough number right now. We don't have an exact number on workers' compensation. So we have to figure that in, and we're still working through the defined benefit, the actuarially determined contribution for the defined benefit plan. That's still being worked out as well. So there's a lot of work to do, but I'm actually very pleased with where the staff's efforts have brought us this early in March.
Thank you, Mr. Town Manager, and I couldn't agree more. I appreciate both the effort in preparing this and the activities that all staff, even the people who are not supervisors, are working hard and perhaps not having access to as many materials as they might like and so on in order to bring us in under budget. Just one quick question comment. I presume that the excess speed camera revenue and expense will require a budget amendment before the end of the fiscal year. And I see you nodding, and so just keep an eye on the calendar for that, because it takes some time to push that through. So just remind you of that. Okay, unless there are other questions or comments, are there any public questions or comments?
Mayor, I was just going to tip my hat, as everyone else has, regarding the efforts of staff. I mean, coming in with under by 330,000, that's very commendable.
Absolutely agree. Okay, let's move on to the next presentation, fiscal 2024 challenges and opportunities revisited. Again, Deputy Director Jones.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Again, good evening, council and members of the public. Tonight's presentation will be revisiting challenges and opportunities, as well as the budget priorities and guidelines. So as far as budget priorities for fiscal year 2024, these didn't change from the previous presentation, but just would like to take the opportunity to revisit. So some of the staff budget priorities are delivery of services to town residents, community and economic development, equipment purchases and upgrades, vehicle replacements, and lastly, future funding for CIP. Next slide, we have budget guidelines. So for fiscal year 2024, as well as previous fiscal years, staff utilizes the GFOA, otherwise known as Government Finance Officers Association. And we follow the Distinguished Budget Presentation Award guidelines. Some of the main criteria include financial structure, policy and process, financial summaries, capital and debt, departmental information, and lastly, document-wide criteria. So next we will touch upon budget challenges for fiscal year 2024. So the first that we have is funding and planning for CIP expenditures. So there will be some difficulty funding capital acquisitions, as well as any new projects. As we discussed in the previous meeting, when we discussed some of the revenue projections for the current fiscal year, revenue net expenditures is not expected to be as high as it has been in years past. And when we revisited the fund balance sheet, we could see that it would prove to be a bit more difficult, as we would not have as much money in the general fund to transfer over to fund capital improvement, economic development, community development, and such forth. So funding and planning for CIP expenditures, capital acquisitions, and new projects, those are all some budget challenges that we are currently facing. The next, we have debt service. In years past, we've also used some general fund dollars to transfer over to debt service. So with less availability of funds, We also find that to be a budget challenge as well. COVID-19 uncertainty is still something that staff is taking into consideration, and we view that as a budget challenge as well. Additionally, we have geopolitical uncertainty, including some supply chain issues, again, the ongoing situation in Ukraine, all of which are being considered as we proceed with the budget at this point. And lastly, we have inflation and how the Fed continues to react. There seems to be new news every week considering inflation and the economy. So staff is continuing to monitor economic policy, the economy, and such moving forward, as it, the inflation and such may have some direct as well as indirect effects on the town. So this is another budget challenge that the town is considering as we move forward with the budget process. And next we have budget opportunities. So one of the budget opportunities that we have potentially is the real property tax. Again, we are going to continue to be very conservative with our estimates on real property tax revenue. In being conservative, we do so we don't overestimate any revenue, and that any additional revenue that exceeds our estimates could potentially be used for CIP, which is very crucial considering the state of where we are right now in putting together the budget. Additionally, with many of the challenges that I discussed on the previous slide, including COVID-19, inflation, geopolitical issues, being conservative is increasingly important. Next opportunity that we potentially have is Safe Speeds for Students revenue, which is our speed camera revenue. Again, we continue to be conservative with our estimates of speed camera. In being conservative, we won't overestimate any revenue there, and any additional revenue that exceeds our estimates could potentially be used for CIP purposes as well. One thing we'd like to note is that speed camera revenue that exceeds our estimates should be used for police-related CIP projects. So, if we have any excess need for public works or any other department, we wouldn't be able to use it there. But with all the challenges discussed in the previous slide, again, being conservative is going to be increasingly important, and we are continuing to do so as we put together the budget at this point in time. So that concludes our presentation on revisiting budget priorities, guidelines, challenges, and opportunities. And at this point, any questions, I'd be happy to answer.
Thank you, Deputy Director Jones. Council members, questions or comments? Members of the public, any questions or comments? Well, I will just say thank you for this presentation, and there's nothing that's surprising in here. Appreciate your work and appreciate knowing that the budget staff are looking at all these issues as we move forward. So thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, next item on the agenda is my report, and I will start just to be sure I don't by reporting that we had a closed session of the town council immediately preceding this meeting today. We started at about 7:37 p.m. It was a Zoom meeting. The motion to close the meeting was made by Councilmember Lingua, seconded by Councilmember Smith, and approved by Council members Lingua, Smith, and Foe. I abstained. Absent were Councilmember Siddiq, Councilmember Mejia, and Councilmember Mayers. We used statutory authority general provisions article 3-305B3, which was to consider the acquisition of real property for a public purpose and matters directly related thereto, and specifically to discuss whether and if yes, how to pursue acquisition of a particular parcel of real estate in town. And as I think everyone knows, I try to be as transparent as I can without going over and revealing the reason, revealing things that would make the fact we had a closed meeting not so useful. And this one is a pretty tight discussion, so I can't provide any more information than that. There were no votes, recorded votes taken in the meeting. And persons attending were myself, Councilmember Smith, Councilmember Foe, Councilmember Lingua, Director Barnes, Director Lewis, Mr. Smith, and excuse me, Director Smith, Finance Director, and Town Manager of the station. I have two Smiths in there. I need to fix that before.
God loves us. He made a lot of us.
Finalize that report. So moving on to my report and seeing what time it is, I'll try to go through this. Just touching very lightly on COVID, CDC has reported that long COVID is bad. I think we have known that before. They now identify that many people who have long COVID have apparently permanent organ damage, and that it can lead to death. That it's that once you're past the crucial phase, then you can still die from the long COVID many months, weeks or months later. And speaking of deaths, I believe that this is just an anomaly of reporting at this time, but I'll be keeping an eye on it. That deaths in the state of Maryland are up 77%, close to double over the last 14 days. And I think that's because many counties, many agencies report around the time at the end of the beginning of the month. And so the fact that we had a couple of weeks before that where there were fewer reports anyway, then those reports came in and it went way up. But as I said, it may be something else. In the United States as a whole, over the same period, deaths are up 41%. And so it looks like there may have been a wave of infections that didn't seem so bad, but is worse than it they had initially seemed. So as always, while vaccinations are not perfect, and it's particularly against the dominant strain right now, the newest bivalent vaccine is 50% more effective than not getting it at avoiding infection, and is somewhat higher than that for avoiding hospitalization and death. So vaccination is good, and avoiding contact with those who have COVID by overall avoiding contact or wearing a mask to filter the air. And as always, a high quality mask and N95 or better is the best way to, all those are the best ways to stay healthy. I reported very briefly last week that I attended the Maryland Mayors Association meeting and saw a nice picture of myself near Governor Moore in there. I was not wearing a mask, but I had it in my hand. I knew there was a photo op. I was taking advantage of it. At the Maryland Mayors Association meeting, we discussed First Amendment audits, and I believe that the town is reasonably well prepared for those, but we'll be continuing to have discussions with the town manager about how we might pass one better. These are basically where someone comes in and videotapes the normal operations of town with a goal of getting a rise out of the staff and being able to get viewers on social media sites and make money by having more viewers, or to trigger an action that can result in a lawsuit, and they can make money in that way. Those are all the motivations that were discussed. So, normally I would say a First Amendment audit is fine, but in this case, I think it is. While it's acceptable thing and something we should be ready to deal with, I don't think it's a particularly noble activity that anyone is doing. Another topic discussed was cybersecurity. Again, I feel like the town is pretty on top of things. We did have a minor breach a few weeks ago. It was caught very early, and there are a few the keys to avoiding a serious cybersecurity incident. I think the town is on top of. There's a few places, again, I'll be working with the town manager to see if we can implement a few more pillars of cybersecurity to make ourselves safer. And of course, I was able to network and talk to a bunch of other mayors. That was always good. Met with District 22 team, our newly sworn in Senator Washington. New delegate was not yet sworn in, so he was not at that meeting. Some interesting legislation that's in play, and I think we might want to write some letters in support of that at our special legislative next week. We already wrote the letter in support of stormwater mitigation, increasing the funding for that to $20 million a year. There's a bill in place to allow automated enforcement of not just red lights and speeding, but also stop signs, one-way signs, etc. And this has the advantage of allowing our officers to deal with more serious crimes rather than trying to catch people running stop signs, and can make our streets safer in that way. And also it decreases direct contact between police officers and those who have broken the law for these minor infractions, which can minimize the chances for something going badly in such an interaction. Another bill that's underway is automated enforcement of noisy vehicles, those that have drilled holes in their mufflers. Another automated enforcement, and again, I'm hopeful that will pass, but we might want to send a letter in support next week. And last but not least, bond bills. These are the state funds that have paid for many things that we're up to. We have a couple of requests in. Senator Washington mentioned that he had $7 million in requests from the district, and there was $20 million to be spent statewide. And so I don't think we're going to get everything we asked for, but I did enjoy talking to him. Under development, switching back to things in town. Development, I had an email conversation with Councilmember Olson's office about changes to the legislation that authorizes the legacy MUTC zone, and hopeful that we're back on track for making some progress on improving the long-term prospects for that zoning and the design review committee that exists. So we've had very good results out of. We were supposed to hear from the Chambers property at the meeting last week. They bowed out at the last moment. They were not ready to talk to us, so maybe next month. And we are still having continuing discussions with the lofts. They did not present anything new at the legacy MUTC. I think that they are waiting to see what happens with the zoning ordinance and moving ahead with some of those discussions. Almost last but not least, one next to last item, the Sustainability Committee is working on recertification and would love to have some help in writing up the many things that the town has done to be more sustainable over the last 3 years. And so please contact Laura Katz or one of the other members of the Sustainability Committee if you're interested in helping out with that. I know they had a long organizing meeting because I was across the room from my wife, who's part of the group that's working on that. But as I said, they can use your assistance. And last but not least, I attended an open house at our new congressional representative, Representative Ivy's district office on Saturday. Ran into Councilmember Lingua there. I felt like there's a lot of energy, a lot of good things happening there, and was very pleased to have a short discussion with him about the possibility of us getting some earmarks towards stormwater. And we are in discussions with town staff about how to make that happen. And again, that might be something that shows up in our special legislative next week. So that's about as fast as I could get it out. So sorry about that. A lot of news to report. But that concludes my mayor's report. Any questions? Not going to give you too long. So, Mr. Town Manager's report.
Yes, Mr. Mayor and members of council, I will be very brief. A reminder that next week on the 13th, a week from today at 7:30, we have the State of the Town presentation. And so we look forward to sharing with the council and the community the state of the town's affairs. There's also a community conversation scheduled for March 18th at 9:30. That's virtual. And it's regarding the Walk, Bike, Drive Safety Initiative. And then on March 23rd, there's a Town Seal Design Committee meeting. That's virtual meeting on the 23rd at 7:30 p.m. And that's all I have this evening, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Town Manager. Next on the agenda is the monthly finance report.
Mr. Mayor, were you going to hold that till next week?
Why don't we do that? Why don't we just hold the report until next week, since we can't vote on it tonight? We can just skip that. Okay, next item on the agenda is the correspondence summary. There's one item about historic work permits at Riversdale, which is for archaeological digs. Unless there's well, we can't do anything, so unless there's any questions about that. I did not receive a fire department report. Did staff receive one?
No, we have not, sir.
Okay. And that brings us to council, committee, and ward reports. And we'll start with Councilmember Smith, Ward 1.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. As others have gracefully been brief, I'll try to do my best as well. We have had the luxury, in some senses, I guess, of relatively mild winter. I'm looking towards my annual spring trimming the beard back coming sooner than usual this year, and cherry blossoms are opening sooner, and all of those great things, which, you know, may be good for our comfort, but we also know that those are a product of climate change. As we have talked about a lot here, climate change is something we have to consider as in every decision that we make as a town, and it's no longer, and hasn't been for some time now, something that is on the horizon. It's here. We have areas of our town that are designated floodplains that weren't 10 or so years ago. Areas of our towns that flood on what was previously called 100-year floods that have, you know, we've had 3 of them in the last decade. That is high concern. I'm glad to hear that we're looking at earmarks for that stormwater management from the feds. Also this weekend on Saturday, our county council member Eric Olson and his staff will be around the area of Ward 1, south of Riverdale Park Station, east of 410, and west of the tracks. Did I describe that correctly? Okay, good. And north of 410. By the way, that will be between 9:45 and 10:45 a.m. Fortunately, I won't be able to make it. This is my busy travel time of the year for my day job. I just got back last night, actually, from Baton Rouge. I'll be in San Francisco next weekend. Fun times, not so much. And thank you to Ward 1 constituent Eve Schuman, who's now working as the Director of Intergovernmental Affairs for our state comptroller, who also has scheduled a tour of the Discovery District upcoming next week. So looking forward to that. And lastly, I know that we here in Riverdale Park are a inclusive and welcoming community, and that we take pride in that. And I think that's the case for our larger Prince George's County community as well. But this past week, some folks came into our community at the annual CPAC conference held at National Harbor here in PG County, and there was some pretty abhorrent things spoken on that stage, particularly folks openly advocating the elimination, I'll say that again, the elimination of transgender people. We are, again, open, accepting, inclusive in this community. I hope we are doing everything we can to let the LGBTQ community, particularly the transgender community, and here in Riverdale Park, know that we stand with them. This is not I mean, they are some crazy people, but it's not just some crazy people on the fringes. The man that, made those comments did so on the same stage that people that are seeking the presidency of this country stood on minutes later. And no one batted an eye. I take offense to that as a resident of this community, of the Prince George's County community. I hope that everyone else does as well. And that we're making everyone feel as welcome as possible here as a town here in Riverdale Park. So just for the record, to get it out there, trans rights are human rights. Trans men are men, trans women are women. We stand in solidarity with all marginalized people, and particularly in this moment with the transgender community here in Riverdale Park. And that'll conclude my report. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councilmember Smith. Councilmember Lingua.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. Not really that much to report this evening. Most of what could be said, I said last week, so we'll just leave it at that.
Thank you. That's a record short word report.
Brevity being the soul of wit.
It is. So that gets us through council committee and ward reports. We already had public comments on non-agenda items and consent agenda items. So that takes us to the end of the agenda, to adjournment. May I please have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Motion has been made and seconded. We're sort of out of quorum, so all we can vote to do is adjourn. So I'll do a roll call vote. Councilmember Smith.
Aye.
Councilmember Lingua.
Aye.
And I'll vote aye just to give us 3 votes and make it look good in the record. But we are adjourned at 10:54 p.m. Thank you all.
Have a good night.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks all. You have a good evening.